Hey, good evening, everybody.
On.
Okay, we'll get started in just 1 second. Okie dokie. So I want to take a fresh angle on the Simanim of Rosh Hashana. And hopefully help us have something good to prepare. So I'll just give a second. And maybe I'll even share my screen so you can see some of the... Okay, everybody, welcome. About to get started. Hey guys, nice to see everybody. And here we are. Okay, so let's learn a little Torah relating to Rosh Hashana and get all ready. There's a Gemara here. I'm going to share the screen with you so that if you want, you can see it too. I mean, let's try it. Why not? We'll be educationally sophisticated. So you can also hopefully see me. But here's the screen too. Gemara says, does everybody see it? Is this working? If you're on Facebook Live, you're not going to see it. But if you're on Zoom, you could see it. Okay. And I didn't even do Instagram Live because, if you're that age, you're probably not tuning in. Okay, so here we go, friends. It says a really interesting thing. Hi, man de boy leda, a person that wants to know, if he will live through the next year or not. Are you going to live through the year or die during the year? You want to know that? I want to know that. I'd love to know. Here's how you can do this. There's a trick. Maisi shraga. You bring a lamp. During the 10 days that begin with Rosh Hashanah and end with Yom Kippur. Right, that's a translation for Yom Kippur, is Yom Kippur. Okay, and put it in a house where no wind blows. In other words, there's no windows, there's no draft. Should the light continue, in other words, the candle doesn't go out, there was enough material there for the light to last, you'll survive the year. So this is a real trick. You need to figure out if you're going to live through the year or not. Get a candle, put it in a house where there is no breeze, and if it survives, there's enough oil, then you'll know that you'll live through your year. Yahrzeit candle maybe. And if not, you're in trouble. You're up a creek. If somebody wants to join a business, and you want to know if your business will succeed, should you invest in that company with all of your life savings? Yeah. I don't know, a restaurant that's like Irish Asian fusion. You can name it O-Walks or something. Oh, wait, okay, whatever. Yeah, so you want to know if it's going to succeed in advance. So here's what you do. Nirbi Tarnagola. Raise a rooster. Isham, and if it gets fat, ushvar. Yeah, shifra means beautiful, right? It gets fat and good looking. Neida de mitzlach, you'll know it will succeed. Hayman de boy nafik urcha. So a third thing, if a person wants to go on a journey, uboy neida ihadul base, he wants to know if he'll ever make it home or not. Will he be shipwrecked and have to live out the rest of his life in some kind of, Turkmenistan or some other country you'd completely forgotten exists, right? But it's a real country filled with people. So nekom bevesa de bahasa. He should go into like a dimly lit house. Is I believe the best way to translate that. I mean, not that it's an easy one to translate, but Rashi is afel b'mixas. Yeah, so like a dim house, and see if you can see b'bavua lebavua. If you can see the reflection of your own reflection in a dim house, then you can know that you will survive and come home. Holy cannoli. So there's a way to know if you're going to live through the year, and a way to know if you're going to be successful in any given business endeavor. And there's a way to know, my friends, if you'll make it back from your journey. Says the Gemara, V'lav milsahi. This is not a thing. This is not a thing. Says Rashi, Delo li aved inish hachi. No person should try these. Why? I'm going to continue reading in Rashi. Then we'll go back to the Gemara. But I'll read you the Gemara first. Dilma chol shadaite umitra mazole. Maybe you will be chalishas hadas. It means, your mind will weaken. The person will be broken. They'll be heartbroken. They'll be crestfallen that they discovered they're going to die during the year. And then their mazel will go bad. So, dear friends, let's read Rashi. You got to see this. I just want to show it to you inside so you know I'm not making it up. Okay, everyone? Look at this. Delo levid inish hachi. A person shouldn't try these tricks. There are tricks with which you can determine if you'll live through the year. Some kind of a voodoo type of thing, right? Don't try it. Dilma hava simana bisha, because maybe you will get the bad result. So you'll find out you're going to die. And then what happens? Umitzar nafshe, and that causes you pain. Umitra mazale, and your mazel goes down, gets bad. Okay, so I want to discuss it, but then I have to first show you what it says next in the Gemara, and then we got to take this apart, because it's almost contradictory. Look at the next one. Amar Abaye, says the great Abaye. Abaye. Yeah, we should cheer yay every time we say Abaye, because this is one of the greatest heroes of Jewish history. If you don't know anything about Abaye, you are missing out on the riches of Judaism. He's one of the most influential and important rabbis of the Talmud. All of our ancestors spent nights and months wondering, what did Abaye mean and what did Rava mean? This is Abaye, Amar Abaye. And we all do this at our Rosh Hashana meals because of Abaye. Hashta da Amrit Simana Milsahi. Now that I know that there's something called a Siman, so these things are called Simanim. Now that I know that such a thing works, listen to this. So you weren't supposed to do these other ones to figure out if you're going to live or die. But now that I know this works, Yehe Rogil Inish, a person should make a habit. Lemechal, to eat, Reish Shata, on Rosh Hashana. Kra, pumpkins, gourd, rubia, the black-eyed peas, karti, leeks, silka, beets, tamri, and dates. Again, the Gemara says if you want to know if you're going to live through the year, I'm going to stop screen sharing so that my head gets bigger in your view. And then you get to see my head. So, big win for you. But, sometimes it helps people focus, right? To look at a large orange head. I'm an educational master here. So, listen to this. If you want to know if you're going to live through the year, so there's a solution. Light a candle and then see if it lasts for 10 straight days. But it has to be in a house with no windows and doors. And if you want to know if you're going to be successful in business, fatten up a turkey and see how that goes. And if you want to know if you'll survive, don't do it. It's bad for you. Because you might get a bad result and then it'll actually happen. Now that this is true, make sure to eat a variety of pumpkins and all kinds of interesting things on Rosh Hashanah. It's one of the most interesting rituals that we have. It's not a mitzvah. Jewish people generally are not. I don't believe that we have mitzvahs. We don't really have rituals. So it's interesting that suddenly eat these special foods for good luck. I don't believe so much in doing stuff for good luck. If a person wears a rabbit's foot for good luck, they're foolish. And it's against the Torah to do. And if a black cat crosses your path and you change your path, you violate a whole slew of Torah commandments. Because we are rational, sensible people, and we're not allowed to be imbeciles. It's a real mitzvah of the Torah. Tamim tia. Be normal. Tamim means just simple. Don't try to predict the future with all kinds of wacky tarot cards. And so what did we just learn? Does it work or does it not work? If it does work, then what's the problem? If you found out you're going to die during the year, you found out the truth. If it doesn't work, then what are we talking about? Then why not do it? It's nothing. So I believe it's pretty straightforward. And I think it's a huge lesson, and I think it's the beginning of a huge opportunity for us to take ownership of our lives. Is everyone ready? Listen to what the Gemara just said. It's a sophisticated and clear thing. There's an enormous power of the predictive ability of the human psyche. If you really believe something is going to happen, that has enormous control over a person. So I have met people, there's one person I know, who when they were young, they always said they wanted to be a doctor. To which their father would say, you're not a doctor type, you're an artistic type. You just don't have the doctorate. You're awesome, but it wasn't even said in a bad way. It was a well-meaning dad. And this guy kept failing in medical school. He just kept failing. Like he couldn't finish. Isn't that something? Until he figured out that he actually had kind of heard that a lot of times in his life. And it took just taking control of his head again. He went to a good therapist and figured himself out, and that was no longer a problem. Oftentimes, a person will go to, a tarot card reader, I don't know, Madame Fatima. I don't know, what are the names? What's a good name for, Madame Svetlana. It's an exotic name, and usually they have a somewhat shabby storefront. I have not seen one of those on Rodeo Drive recently. I'm just saying. Usually they're, it's an interesting neighborhood. It's all the rest of them are private houses, and this one has a shingle out. A lot of wind chimes on the porch and all kinds of, whatever. And there's a cauldron involved. So you go to this person and they tell you are going to break up with your boyfriend. And sure enough, the woman goes home and there's finger snapping in a Z. And eventually that disagreement leads to them breaking up. And the person, what a brilliant tarot card reader. I may be oversimplifying it, but this is not false. When you really believe something is going to happen, that's an incredibly powerful thing to the human mind. Says the Gemara, there are things that can predict whether you will live, whether you will be successful, right? And whether or not you'll make it home from your journey. But don't try those things, because it's an enormous risk if you find out that you won't live. Because then your mind will be very heartbroken, you'll be very sad, and you might actually kill yourself. You might actually die, not deliberately, but you might actually fall into the predictive power. Does this ring true? I mean, this is absolutely true. People who believe things. I'm going to give you some examples from reality. If anybody recognizes the name Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister, the first thing I think of is Whoopi Goldberg in that Nun Sister Act thing going down the banister, but that's not who he was. Roger Bannister was the first gentleman to run. It's funny, on Zoom, I say things that I think are funny, and it's just like fish in a bowl. So when it's with my class in school, I know it's because they have another device right under their computer that they're watching Netflix on. So they laugh at random times, depending upon when Jim and Dwight do goofy things in the office or something, but never at what I'm saying. And that's what I attribute it to, at least, right? But when it's here, when everyone logged in voluntarily, I'm mystified as to why people are not guffawing and slapping their thighs and roaring with laughter. So I can't make heads or tails of it. Anyway, listen to this, right? This Roger Bannister is the first guy to run the 4-minute mile, which was believed. It was believed to be impossible for the human to run a 4-minute mile. That just can't be done. No person can do it. As soon as he did it, there was a slew of people who, in his wake, did the same thing. Ran a mile in 4 minutes or less. So why didn't they do it before? Were they less capable before? If you don't believe it's possible, that's a massive barrier to doing something. It's the biggest barrier. The biggest barrier between me and you and the next thing that's going to go, the next stage in our life. But I want to tell you, if you're a growing person, which I'm looking around here, every person that I see here is a growing, I would say, these are growing people.
No, it was only $90. It's probably stolen.
Yes, that's what I always say.
At least 3.
Okay. So, listen, my friends, this is good. I mean, if you're a growing person in your life, then here's what you will discover. There was a time in your life when if I would have told you or someone would have told you, one day you might be like this, it would have been inconceivable. You would say, there's no way I'm going to be that. There's no way I am going to be an observant Jew. There's no way right? For sure, if you're a growing person, there are things in your spiritual and emotional state now that were once completely inconceivable to you. And the biggest change, I'm arguing, based on this Gemara, is that when you believe something to be true, or you believe something to be impossible, that's incredibly predictive. And this is going to make a ton of sense why Abaye suddenly says, hey, there's a way to use this capacity of the human mind to start your new year. At the beginning of a year, there's a way to use this to determine things about how your year's going to be. Do you want to be successful in business? Do you want to be successful in your marriage? Do you want to be successful in your life? Do you want to be a better dad? Do you want to make double the money? So I need you to know something. Confidence is critical, but it's impossible to have confidence if it's not realistic. In other words, if you would have confidence that you're now going to go jump 300 feet in the air, you would have to know that you could do that. If you don't know that you can do it, it's not really confidence. It's something else, and that doesn't work. You don't really believe you're going to do it. But if there's something that's you're capable of doing something, and you believe I can and I will, that's the biggest thing that's in the way. So if you're not capable of making a whole bunch of money this year, right, or supporting your family even, then you're not capable and nothing's going to help, even false confidence. But if you are capable and you figure out your abilities, you can predict how you want your life to go. And if it's realistic, you'll do it. When I was growing up, I would watch baseball, and everyone knew that no one had ever hit more than 61 home runs in 1961. And that was who? Roger Maris, right, of course, everyone at once. So Roger Maris did 61 and 61. No one else had done it since then. As soon as it started to happen when I was a teenager, it was everyone at once. It was Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds and another guy who was on steroids. I mean, it was just great. Everybody was knocking home runs out at once, but they had been on steroids since 1961. So why did it only happen at once? And of course it's because once someone does it, it's now possible. I could do it too. This is one of the reasons why having good influences around is so critical. For your children, for yourself. When someone else is doing it, it becomes possible. When a person's standing next... Sure, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why did you say earlier that tarot cards are not good, or like going to people for readings is not...
Oh, sure.
Not a good thing?
So I'll share with you a moment about it, and I'd be happy to revisit it later as well. So it says explicitly in the Torah, one of the 613 mitzvahs is tamim tihya im Hashem Elokecha. One of the positive commandments is not to try to figure out the future through other ways, but rather to live a life without doing that. Additionally, the Torah has several negative commandments. It's not such a well-known thing, but there's actually a fantastic book in Hebrew called Tamim Tihya by a great scholar named Rabbi Yaakov Hillel in Jerusalem. He's a great Kabbalist, and they translated it to English called Faith and Folly. And it's like a very outstanding presentation of this idea. But I'll tell you even an example. I'm just going to tell you guys one story to illustrate this. There was a couple who got engaged. And they went to like some person who was, a Kabbalist of some kind. And they told them their Hebrew names. And this person said, oh, no, those names don't go right in heaven. You can't get married. And they went to another great rabbi in Israel. Who was considered like one of the greatest of his time. And he said, if you follow the advice of this person, you violate this many commandments in the Torah. The Torah expects you to use your mind to make the best decision you can. And you're not allowed to follow. God told you in the Torah, don't listen to a man who tells you, but your names, the gematria of the names doesn't add up right. That's not how we're supposed to live our lives. Avraham Avinu came and broke the idols and said, don't follow these kinds of things. Follow God and trust only in God. And the best way we can do so is by studying Torah and applying our intellect and so forth. A person who says, no, but a black cat crossed my path. So that's a person who's going to live a life based on all kinds of false things. A person who says, no, I trust in God. And I think you and I can also understand, if we just consider it, what kind of inner peace a person could live with when they realize there really is a God who runs the world. And he really does take care of us. And it is not necessary to be alarmed or worried about our future. Our job is to do our best, and God is there to take care of us. And being scared and being worried and saying, oh no, a black cat crossed my path, and those sort of things, that's not the sort of life that's Noam, that's v'chol netivoteh shalom. Like, it's not a life of calmness and peace, and it's a life of turmoil. So perhaps this is a bit of what's behind those prohibitions in the Torah that tell us don't go to try to get your future predicted and these kind of things. That being said, if you didn't know about this mitzvah and once tried this or something, I'd love to hear more about your experiences sometime, because you have a unique perspective going forward on how you are going to do the mitzvah. Continuing. And if anybody wants to talk about this more, ask more about this, I'm very happy to discuss further afterwards. So please don't hesitate to speak up. And thank you for your question, Naya. So let's go back to what we're learning. The Talmud is telling us that the Simanim of Rosh Hashana, the signs that we do on Rosh Hashana, are exactly the proper way to use this truth that what we set for ourselves and predict for ourselves becomes our reality in a major way. So I'm going to tell you a story from Chumash where it says, famously in Chumash, that Sarah Imenu had a baby at a very advanced age. Read about this on Rosh Hashanah. It happened on Rosh Hashanah. Hashem pakad es Sarah. Hashem Amar. One of the major events of Rosh Hashanah is Sarah getting pregnant, which was an astonishing thing. She was a very old woman and her husband was very old. It was completely miraculous. Sarah got pregnant, and that was incredibly unique. And then it says in the Gemara, based on the verses, the Talmud teaches, Kishenifkid Sarah, when Sarah got pregnant at an advanced age, Harbe Akoros Nifkidu Ima, lots of other barren women also got pregnant at the same time. Wait, so like there was a slew of like older women and barren women who suddenly were having kids. And they all knew somehow that this was from Sarah. It was her influence. So comes along the Taz al HaTorah in a Sefer Divrei David, it's like 350 years ago. He asks a question. He says, if everyone was just suddenly, if according to this tradition, that everyone was just suddenly having children at an advanced age, then how did people know to attribute it to Sarah? That's a pretty solid question. They'll just think she's another one of the people. So he answered, from the context, he proves, it was only women who had heard about Sarah. When you heard about her and you saw that it was possible for her, then it became possible for you. Everyone get this? It's only possible when she set an example. She said, if you have faith in God and you believe and you pray, then God will reward you with a child. And when she saw that in action, another woman from the neighborhood saw that, it had a real impact on her. And she went and did the same thing. Does that make sense? There's another teaching. It says, we talk about Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak. Now, in many ways, those of us who know, it's considered a test on Avraham and not on Yitzchak. The test is one of the 10 tests of Abraham. But Yitzchak was an adult, according to our tradition. He was in his 30s. And he was willing, and he participated, and he was willing to get killed. Because he also was ready to do the will of God. So the question that is asked by the commentaries is, why do we consider Akedat Yitzchak to be a great, great merit for Abraham? And it's almost a side point that Yitzchak did it. And so one of the sources says something so beautiful. There's a lot of different approaches. And one thing, by the way, is, you know how much we love our children? It's such a crazy amount, the amount we love our children. In a certain way, it's more than we love ourselves, right? Like, I mean, they are an extension of ourselves, but consistently people put their children before themselves, even saying, I would rather die than my children. And so in a certain way, it was harder for Avraham to offer Yitzchak than it would be for a person to offer themselves, which is an important and there's a lot of angles you could consider. One of the sources says something absolutely powerful. It says that before this experience, there had been other people that had had their lives staked for what they believed in. A famous example is Avraham in the fiery furnace. Avraham was prepared to give his life in the fiery furnace, right? In his battle with the idols of his day. Nimrod threw him in, famous story. But no one ever before had been asked by God to sacrifice a child. And so that was what made it so hard. Once one person has done something, it is a lot simpler for people to do it in the future. It's really important. It's really, really important. It means that who you surround yourself in, and within society, there are things in society that are so off the wall and so horrible and so against our values. But you see it once, and you see it twice, and you see it a third time. Be considering what age you expose your children to things. There are ages that are appropriate and ages that are not, and it actually matters. Even if they're never going to do it. At what age do they learn that that's a real thing? It has an impact. Once you know something's possible, it really does have an impact, and it changes the way you see things, and it changes the way you process things. Okay.
Rabbi,
what's up, Reb Benny?
What would that? I mean, sorry to take a weird perspective on this, but would that then? We know that there are pagan tribes that worship their children. I thought they existed before Akedas Yitzchak, which made okay, but
true.
Then you say that Akedas Yitzchak brought it into being. according to your shots.
That's a very valid point. I think I was careful to word myself because I was even thinking there were likely people who gave their lives for their country or for their belief system before, let's say, Avraham was thrown into the fiery furnace, right? So in other words, my theory was, I didn't suggest this, but my explanation, which I tried to be careful as I said it, is that God had never asked anyone to do that. Meaning what makes this test of Hashem as a mitzvah unique is that this was the first person out of loyalty to a monotheistic system of truth and reality to be prepared to make such an enormous sacrifice. Does that make sense? And that would be what makes it unique for Yitzchak, unique for Avraham rather than for Yitzchak. Within our system of Judaism, someone had already been the pioneer in that way. People that are doing things for other reasons, for sure, it for sure has an influence as well. I can't, but when we talk about in the Jewish tradition, who's the hero of Akedah? Yitzchak. That's what I was suggesting, but I do accept the question. I still think the principle is strong. And that's what the Gemara is saying. If you see something that predicts, don't go to tarot card reader, says the Gemara here, because you might get bad results. And those bad results can be so predictive. They can cause that to come into being in your mind and in your experience. And there are those who will take much more mystical approaches to what it means it will cause things to come into being. Now, I'm just not a mystic. I don't know how that works. I'm not discounting it. I'm not, I'm just saying. But even on a purely scientific perspective, I believe this to be 100% true as well. Now, I want to tell you even further. What does it mean that on a Rosh Hashana we should have Simanim? Simanim are a really unique way of communicating. The Simanim of Rosh Hashana, we take an apple and we dip it in honey. And we think this should be a happy and sweet new year. There's a custom to look at them, and there's a custom to eat them. And after we do that, we say a Yehiratzon. Now, the Gemara doesn't say anything about saying the Yehiratzon, saying the prayer, but the Gemara says have them on your table. And in one place it says look at them, and another place it says eat them. Yeah. So we are always careful. Like in our family, we'll make sure that not only will we serve pomegranate seeds, let's say, because one of them is a pomegranate, we'll also have a full pomegranate that you can look at. Because apparently there's a visual sense to this as well. So besides for the seeds, there's also the pomegranate, right? You want to see it, and you want to, okay. So when we can, we'll have the whole fruit and the whole thing as well. Sometimes with the squash, I don't know if we always have the whole squash. Sometimes we just have the cooked food, whatever it is. So in any event, the question is, what is that about? So listen to this magnificent piece from the Bnei Yissaschar. The Bnei Yissaschar was the Rebbe of Dinov. He was a massive Kabbalist, he was a mystic, and he was a genius. And so he's one of the real lights of the last 150 years. The Bnei Yissaschar, the Rebbe of Dinov. Listen what he says. He quotes the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid of Mezrich was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, second generation Hasidic giant, early 1800s. The Maggid of Mezrich said this. He said that if you look in Chumash, it says, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, Hashem created et. He stops the pasuk at the word et. And he says, in the beginning, God created Aleph, Tuf. Alphabet. Words. In the beginning, God created Aleph to Tuf. Using words, he then created the rest of creation. And he points out something really interesting, because the Gemara says, Be'asara ma'amaros nivra ha'olam. There were 10 statements that God made in creating the world. Let there be light, right? Let there be, and so forth, all through. And the Gemara counts them up and notes that we only have 9. Yeah, we only have 9. And you know what the answer is? Bereshis nami maimerhu. The verse of Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'aretz, even though it doesn't say, and God said, let there be heaven and earth, is also a statement. So he says, I don't understand. Either it's a statement or it's not a statement. So he explains very simply. Language that we use to express things is by definition limited. Think for a moment about someone who you love. Think about someone who you love. Do the words, I love you, mean anything? Do they express the level of that? When you think about your child or a parent or someone who you love, is there a way to say what that is? Words are always a poor substitute for the fullness of an idea. So that, and I'll give you some examples of where we see this. If you know anybody who went through like the Holocaust or something extremely traumatic, they often just won't talk about it. And they feel like it would cheapen the whole experience if they would talk about it. Conversely, when a person goes into therapy, one of the most basic tricks, methodologies is, hey, tell me what happened. Talk about it. Express it. And now we'll write it down on this piece of paper and we'll put it in this file. And now this is it. Because when something is so big that it's hard to manage, reducing it to words takes away some of its potency. It just does. But when you have something super inspiring, the Musar Svarim say, it says, the Altar of Kelm says, if there's a story or an experience that is very inspiring to you, don't tell anyone for a while. Because every time you tell it, it's less and less inspiring. Because they don't get it. They aren't you. This is a very important thing. Keep it for yourself while it still inspires you. And then later tell everyone you want. But we're always so excited to tell it, and then people aren't getting it, and they're not, like many of the jokes that I attempt to share, they're just not, and then suddenly it's not even funny to me anymore. I was cracking up on my way, on my way here this evening. Okay, I'm in my house, but, like it doesn't always work. So why is that? Why am I saying this? The Hasidim have a concept of a song without words. It's called a nigun. A nigun, a song without words. When you sing a song without words, they have this concept that sometimes it can express more than you could if you were using words. Because words are by definition limited. But when you sing something without words, it's not that you have nothing in your mind, it's that you have so much to express. The shofar is meant to be exactly that. Say it this far. The shofar is meant to be the human being expressing himself in a way that is meta language. It's before language. When is the day for that? So the Torah calls Rosh Hashana Yom Trua, the day of the shofar blast. It doesn't call it Rosh Hashana. It calls it the day of the shofar. That's the Torah's name for the day. Not only that, the Torah says Rosh Hashana is the day of the creation of the world. Well, let's look at the day of the creation of the world. What happened? God said, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, but we just learned God didn't say it with words. He created language. He created the framework in which everything else could then be expressed. That's day number one. It's this day that's above language, my friends. It's above language. It's that day that before you tell someone, I love you, before you make a business deal with someone, before you make an arrangement, there has to be something. That's Rosh Hashanah. And Bereshit is also a mimer. It's also a form of saying something too, but it doesn't say it with words, apparently. It doesn't say, Vayomer Elokim, and God said. It just, Bereshit, in fact. If you open up a traditional Chumash, Mikras Gedos, a traditional Chumash with the commentaries, one of the commentaries is called Targum Yerushalmi. It's a translation into Aramaic of the Torah. Not every verse, only select verses where he had a comment he translates. And he says, Bereshit, the word Bereshit, Reshit comes from Rosh. And it means Bechuchma, with wisdom. So, in other words, just like matter can transfer into energy, and energy to matter, wisdom is the raw material that transferred itself into the world. Bereshit, using Reshit, God created heaven and earth. Bereshit, it was the wisdom. That's the day. That first day is a day of pure wisdom and thinking. And so when we want to connect into that day, it's all about the mind. It's not so much about the words, but it's about the mind. So the mitzvah of tshuva is the mitzvah of saying your sins. And that's what we do on Yom Kippur. That's words. And it's the 10th day, right? Because there's the 10 days of creation until the end, right? The 10 statements of creation until the end. And so when we finally have finished from the beginning of creation, it takes us 10 days, not 7 days, right? And we wind up at Yom Kippur. So that's a day of talking. In fact, there are 5 motza'ot hapeh. There are 5 ways, that sounds come out. In Lashon HaKodesh, 5 different ways, and I assume that anybody who's a speech therapist knows about the 5 different ways that a person makes sounds. The Chamisha Motzos HaPeh. There are 5 levels of soul. The Midrash says there are 5 different names for the soul: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Yechida is the highest level. The Sefer Tanya spends a lot of time discussing what that highest level is. On a regular day, a person has access to 3 levels of their soul: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. That's the normal. On a regular day, you have them all, but that's what you're working with, and therefore there are 3 prayers in each day, because prayer is an expression of language, right? Which is when the soul expresses itself. When you have ideas inside and you want to express them, that is through language and talking. And that's how we work with spiritual concepts and ideas, is through language. That's on a daily basis. On Shabbat, we have a fourth prayer because you get a neshama yesera on Shabbos and holidays. You get an additional access to another level of your soul, and therefore there's a fourth prayer called Musaf. On Yom Kippur, you have all five. You have five, and so you have in the Ne'ilah, you have the fifth, because there's an access to all of the ability of a human being to express himself and to bring his soul out. But you can't bring something out until you know you have it and you're connected to it. And so
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
I have a question.
Of course.
So I'm just kind of wrestling with this concept of language and the limits of language. You said that in the Bereshit, he created et and you aleph tet and you taf, and you're arguing that this is the aleph base, that God created language. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm quoting that from the Maggid of Mezrich. And it's being used by the Bnei Yissaschar, who quotes that piece from the Maggid of Mezrich, to then go on to make a point that we're going to say in a second about the Simanim of Rosh Hashana. So yeah, you're on the right track.
Why create? I get it. I understand. Why create? Because, Adam, one of the things bring him into existence vis-a-vis language. But if language is limited, why bring something? I'm not understanding. Why do that?
Excellent. Okay. So I would say the following. That the human experience is such that what we're doing is we're bridging physical and spiritual, right? So in other words, the way the Torah describes the human being, it's a very astute question. I mean, and I hope that my answer is really on point. So but give me a shot, because I think you're really nailing something. Human beings are a mixture of the breath of God and a little bit of dust of the earth. That's what it says. God took dust of the earth and breathed the soul into it, breathed from himself into it, and that became the human being. The balance of spirituality and physicality is a uniquely human thing. We are guided by morals and values and ethics. Animals kill other animals. Survival of the fittest. I mean, is gravity ethical or not ethical? It just is. So why is it wrong for a human being to kill another human being, but it's not for an animal to kill another animal? And the answer is because we are a mixture of spirituality and physicality. And so taking God's spirituality, truth and spirituality, and bringing it into the physical world is called in the Midrash Adira B'Tachtonim. It's almost like making God a home down below. It's taking the purpose of humankind is to take abstract spirituality and make it human. And so there's all these midrashim that talk about things allegorically, like the angels complaining and saying, hey, why not give us the Torah? And Moshe going up and battling with the angels to bring the Torah down. That's very important. You wouldn't be better if you were an angel, because the whole purpose of creation is that spirituality should become something that the human race, right? Like if you know somebody who knows a ton of Torah and a ton of things, but they're still rude to the waiter and they still cheat on their taxes, it's maddening, right? It's maddening. Why? Because the purpose of it is for the physical. Language is represented throughout as your soul expressing itself through physicality. It is not enough to just think stuff. When you pray, it's not enough to just think your prayers. You got to say them. When you love somebody, you've got to tell them, I love you. Don't just think it. Well, she knows I love her. You have people who say, so what? That's not enough. You got to say it, and you got to say it over and over again and never shut up. Language is the ability to take ideas and use them and think with them. In fact, in Jewish thought, there are 4 levels. So there's inanimate objects, there's animate objects, right? Like living, so that's somech, growing. Then there's living beings like animals, and then there are speaking creatures. Humans are called midaber. Now that's unique. I would have thought we're thinkers, Homo sapiens. Why speakers? And you know what the answer is? Imagine we didn't have words. Imagine we didn't have words, we just had thoughts. Would you be able, if you don't know what I'm saying, you say, hey, can you explain with other words? We use words to be able to manipulate and think through ideas. My theory is that if monkeys had the capacity for language, it's not that they're not as smart as us. Imagine humans without language. What the difference maker is the language, not the brain. That is the theory of medieval Jewish philosophers, the Kuzari and others. So therefore, what we would be saying then is that when we say language, we're saying the capacity of a creature, of a human being, to be able to grapple with spirituality in a way that explains his world, explains his experience. Adam looked at the animals and he gave them names. That means he took the capacity for language, which he was endowed from God. The soul that was blown into him, Unkala says, means God blew into him the soul. Unkala says, Ruach Mamala, means the power of speech. That's the translation of onkelos on the. It's like, that's this. Getting the soul means getting the soul in a body. A disembodied soul is meaningless. Therefore, comes Rosh Hashana, the day in which we celebrate what goes behind speech. Before we have speech and how we engage in the world and how we deal with things and the realities of this world, there's this meta level of before that. It's higher than speech. And in that state, here's what we do. We take a fruit, right? We take a vegetable, we take something and we look at it. We eat it, we think about it, right? And through that experience, we beseech God. Simanim, which is the ability to completely reframe, as we saw in the Gemara, completely reframe how you're seeing the world. It's predictive. You're going to decide what kind of year you want. You're going to decide what kind of person you want to be. And you can do that. Before you walk into a room, you can either have the confidence to say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in. I'm going to be cheerful. I'm going to give you another example that might seem more like mundane. But I really want you to hear this because I think maybe this is the most valuable thing of the whole thing. Maybe. Even though it's maybe less, it's more simple. When you plan stuff out and you predict it for yourself, how you want things to go, that's how you get control of your life. And I'm going to give you some examples. Let me give you first a simple example. I spoke to a woman today who says, what do I do when my husband does ABC? Like, what do I do? It gets me upset and it gets, and so I said to her, okay, listen, you do love him and you want to stay in the marriage, but this is a problem that he has, right? So, and he's working on himself. We both agree he is working on himself and he's trying to be a better person and she sees him getting better. Is it reasonable that he's not going to get angry and say something like that ever again? That's not reasonable. So it's going to come. It's going to come. Now, it's not like he's abusive. This is not, it's a normal person, but like he does certain things sometimes that upset his spouse. Okay, well, most people can relate to this, right? So he decides that he's going to do it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do next time he says something like that or does something like that? So she says, I don't know. So I said, well, what would you expect of yourself? Let's think it through. If you would expect, I hope that if I had the discipline, I know this is going to happen within the next week or two. What's the best way to react? She said, I never thought about that. Okay, imagine this. You go to sleep tonight, and you're in a deep sleep, snoring away, right? And your grandmother or her grandmother, right? Her great-great-great-grandmother comes to you in a dream and smiles lovingly at you and says, you see this man next to me? This is Elijah the prophet. And we're here to tell you something important. Tomorrow's a really big day for you. Tomorrow you're going to be driving your car, and somebody in a pickup truck, is going to cut you off and yell something out the window at you and proudly display their middle finger in your general direction. And it's going to make you upset. And they're watching you in heaven. Because should you control your temper, which is considered a very great mitzvah, and maintain control over yourself, you'll be rewarded for a long time. And should you lose your temper, you stand to lose a lot. So be careful, my sweet grandson, my dear granddaughter, be careful tomorrow. And sure enough, a red pickup truck, described exactly in the dream, cuts you off. Yeah, and it's not just they cut you off anyway, they cut you off on Casio. It's already one of the stages of Dante's Inferno to drive down Casio. Never mind, to have someone cut you off, right? And guess what happens? Do you think about it for a second. Are you going to get upset? Is there any chance? You knew this was coming. And you planned on this. And you knew that spiritual success or failure dependent. You're going to smile to yourself. And you're going to say, I was prepared for this. The Musar Svarim, the Alter of Kelm, and others say that it's called the Koach HaTziyur, the ability to envision things in advance. Picture it. When you go visit your mother, there's certain things she says to you that drive you crazy. Or your mother-in-law, or your boss, or there's someone in your life that does that. And here's what you got to do. Picture it happening. You know it's going to come. And think about when that happens, I'm going to be feeling this. And I'm going to tell myself ABC. And I'm going to remind myself the following. Go for it, right? Pay that. If you do that, you take such control over yourself, over your life. You're not just reacting to stuff. You know it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But how are you going to handle yourself? You get to pick. You get to choose. It might sound, what I just said might sound super, super simple. It's really not. If you want, for example, it's not enough to say, I want a diet. It's not enough. But if you say, not only do I want a diet, when I'm getting cravings for the following food. Let me think about what that feels like. I'm dieting 2 weeks. I've been really good, and now I want to eat this. And I go over to the fridge, and here's what I'm feeling, and here's what I'm thinking. But I'm going to remind myself and you go through it in advance. Then when that comes up later, you're prepared. But people don't do that. They think the commitment is sufficient, and it never works. So New Year's resolutions never last. And it's Rosh Hashana, and the whole thing about Rosh Hashana is turn over a new leaf and do something. And here comes the Gemara and says, envision stuff. Picture things. Forget the language for a minute. Think it over. Get it clear as an abstract concept in your head and picture things about how they're going to be. But that's not all. That's not all. There's another way that this plays out too. If you want to change, well, I'll just give you another example. A person says, I want to wake up on time for davening. I want to go to shul. On Shabbos, in the weekday, I want to go to shul. So, that's very, very easy to do. We all want to. We all want to wake up early and pray. We all want to get up early and do and exercise and this. Everyone wants to do that. But how many of us think about, I know it's going to happen, that the alarm clock is going to ring at 6:30, and I'm going to look at that and say, no way, I went to sleep so late, I'll just do it tomorrow. And what am I going to be feeling? And where's that really coming from? And how am I going to address that? These are the keys to success. And these are I'm just reading you Gemaras and reading from the Hasidic Sfarim. This is not, Stephen Covey, but you'll find the same stuff this is basic. Just envision it well. You're so much closer. Seeing someone else do it really helps. It really helps. But envisioning, you know why it helps? Because then you can imagine yourself doing it. Then you're like, oh, I could do that. And that's one of the greatest game-changing things in life. And so comes Rosh Hashanah. Gemara says, Shofar. How does Shofar work? Shofar is the perfect call. It's beyond any of the details of language. And it's considered prayer. There are two approaches to what Shofar is about. One approach of Shofar is that the Shofar is to wake us up. That's how the Rambam says. The purpose of Shofar is to wake people up. You're walking through life and you're doing the same stuff and you're making the same mistakes over and over again. I don't know about you, but I certainly can say that for myself. I'm in the same place again. It's about to be Rosh Hashanah. And what am I going to do? Repeat last year? All the same things I committed to doing better, and look where I am. It's the same stuff again and again. And is that really it? Wake up! Come on! That's the Shofar. There's another approach. The Ramban has a different approach, because the Rambam and the Ramban always have to say two different things. And the Ramban says that the Shofar is a prayer to Hashem. So according to the Rambam, it's speaking to us. And according to the Ramban, it's a prayer to Hashem. And the truth is that the Midrash says just what the Ramban says. He didn't invent it. It's from the Midrash. That the Shofar is us calling out to God. So the Shofar sort of does two things. It speaks to us and it speaks to God. And those are really, of course, very, very connected. They're not contradictory in any way, but they're two different aspects of this experience. The call to God is so sincere and so pure and so... It's irrelevant what your plans are and your explanations and your understanding. It's above that. Before any of that is this Shofar, this wordless part of our psyche and our self. And it's very strong. There are people that believe in things with all their heart and can't explain it at all. They can't explain it, but they believe in it. And everyone has this. I'm going to give you an example of where most of us have it, because most of us are not very seasoned philosophers. If I were to ask a random, I don't want to pick any of you, because some of you might actually have studied extensive philosophy. But if I pick a random person off the street, and I say, can you prove to me that your children exist? They take out a picture on their phone. No. I mean to intellectually prove that anything exists, including yourself. Can you prove to me that you really exist? And most people, it took Descartes a lifetime to figure out how to prove that, and Wittgenstein still couldn't figure it out. And philosophers have struggled to understand this. Can you prove that you exist? Does anybody here love their children more or less because they could prove that? Do you think if you could learn to prove that, you would love yourself? Do you understand? There's a knowledge, there's an experience, and it's emotional, but it's real, that we have we know what's true. And it's not because it was proven to us in some way. The same thing, by the way, is true about God also. If you can prove philosophically the existence of God, you're still not going to be able to pray as sincerely as my grandmother did. There's no way. She would pray Shemona Esrei for 2 hours in the morning with the phone off the hook, and she was crying her heart out, and she was talking to God, and she knew it, just like you know that you love your children. But you can't prove it? Maybe you could, but I can't. I don't know how to prove that I exist, and yet I really love my kids. It's real. There is an underlying truth. This happens all the time, by the way, when I have the privilege of getting accosted by, animal rights activists, for example, outside of Kaparos, or something like this. And they tell me that it's murder to eat a chicken. It's a murderous thing. It's the same as murder. And you ask the person, you say, let me ask you a question. Can you tell me why it's wrong to murder a person? I mean, where did that come from? Like, why is that wrong? And they say, oh, come on. Can't we just agree on the things we agree upon? I say, no, I want a serious question. Why is it wrong to murder? Well, you wouldn't like it if someone hurt you. Yeah, what I like is irrelevant. I mean, a dog doesn't like it, right? If another animal eats that dog, but lions go after the hyenas. I mean, what makes something wrong? When Christopher Hitchens, the great Christopher Hitchens, or Richard Dawkins, right? These great atheists, when they say, I have a problem with the Bible because the Bible says unethical things. It says to kill out the Amalekites. And so when I've had the privilege of, I didn't get to speak to Dawkins or Hitchens, and Hitchens is in the grave, so it's too late for that one. But when I've had the privilege of speaking to people who share that position, I like to ask them just a simple thing, like, my friend, what makes it wrong to kill somebody? So they always say, well, come on, at least you believe it's wrong to murder? Good, so let's work with that. I say, no. I want to know where you know that something is wrong from. Where could something be fundamentally, existentially, ethically wrong from if there's no absolute source of truth, right? And no one, I've never heard an answer to this question. I don't believe such an answer exists. I actually believe that there's a fantastic essay in the book The Rational Bible by Dennis Prager when it comes to the Ten Commandments. Listen, not everything Prager says is true, but this one is a great essay where he quotes many, like Harvard professors, so about this idea, right? About where does ethics come from? And I'm asking a very simple thing. How does that guy know that it's wrong to murder? Where does it come from? And I'm claiming that that's this. That human sense of right and wrong that we believe everyone has, and we hold people to standards based on that. We have 7 Noahide laws. The 7 Noahide laws that every human being, you can be born anywhere in the world, and you're expected not to kill and not to steal, right? And not to rip the limb off of a live animal like a savage and eat it. Like don't be a complete These basic ideas we expect of people. And we hold them up to those standards. And even if someone was born in the inner city, if they murder someone else, we say you have a soul. And even if you don't have a worked out system of ethics yet, in other words, it's pre-language, right? You have it. You know it's wrong to murder. You're an atheist and you know it's wrong to murder as much as the greatest rabbi in the world knows it's wrong to murder. And you know it's wrong. It's the language. That's Rosh Hashana. It's the creation of reality, and we're all part of reality, so we know it. We know it to be true, and therefore a suicide bomber who was told from his young childhood, hate the Jews, blow up a school bus, blow up a school bus, blow up a school bus, and he goes and does so, we hold him responsible because he has a soul, and he knows what's right inside, and if he would have just quieted things for 5 minutes and thought it through, he would figure out that it's wrong, and he probably did figure out it's wrong. Yeah, but they told me I'm going to get 70 virgins, and you could have figured this out. You were expected to spend the 5 minutes that you could to think that through because we think so highly of human beings. It is very, very destructive to lower our expectations for people to the point that they're not responsible for any of the Noahide laws. If someone is stealing from an innocent person, they are responsible. It doesn't make a difference if they've had trouble with the police and police were mean to them or killed people in their family. The moment you smash the windows of someone's store, you're responsible. You know why? Because you're holy, because you have a soul, because you're fantastic, because you were created in the image of God, because you know right from wrong. And you do, because I know that those people are likely in many parts of their lives fantastic and decent people. And therefore they are responsible for the things that they are doing wrong. And it is only possible to say someone is not responsible if you don't have any respect for them at all. But the Torah considers human beings fantastic, and therefore it is the respect that we have for the soul of a suicide bomber that we consider him responsible and evil. Because we know he has this inside. That level of deep knowledge of the truth, even before a person has an ideology to express it in, or the words to understand it, is something we all live with. We know that we exist. We know we love our kids. We have no need to explore that philosophically. It has no impact. In fact, if it mixes in, if you call your buddy and you say, let's go bowling, and he says, I love bowling, but until I can prove that I exist, I'm not getting out of bed and putting on pants. No way. I'm not going. That's crazy, right? You know why it's crazy? Because the moment that philosophical question, which is a fascinating question, if your friend's writing a book on how do I know I exist, he's not crazy. He's a philosopher. But if he won't put on any pants until he finishes figuring it out, that's depression. That's a problem. We know that. They're two different things. Rosh Hashanah is not about, we don't mention sins on Rosh Hashanah. You're not supposed to be taught. That's not it. Figuring out how to get better is really important in life. But there's a step before it. Envision what's real. Figure out what you really stand for. And forget all the language. You know how easy it is to convince yourself of baloney? Do you know people who can just talk long enough that they can convince themselves of anything? Language is really risky. It's really, really risky. You understand? You can get away with anything. If you think about this, imagine this. You're about to do something that you kind of know is wrong, but you're going through a moral dilemma or something. Which part of you is most effective at convincing you to sin? Is it your animal side going grunt, grunt? Or is it your mind? Because in my experience, it's always the mind saying, actually, this is probably permitted, and I can figure out 9 different ways. And in fact, I heard that hell is only 12 months long anyway, and none of my friends are going to be. Who wants to go to heaven? I don't even like harp music. And it's very sophisticated, the way that our minds, which is supposed to be the good part of us, is able to deceive us quickly into doing all kinds of things. Language and belief systems and all these are very, very risky, but that's only when they deviate from what's really underlying them. What are the truths that you hold self-evident and you know, and they didn't need to be proven, and they just are? And if one of those is that there is good and evil, that's absolute, and Hitler was definitely a bad person, no matter what your perspective is, there's no such thing as my truth. There's either the truth or it's false. There can't be any kind of adjective to describe truth or it's not truth, right? So it's either true or it's false. Is that clear? So that's real. That's really important, right? How do you get to that part of yourself? Because you know it. We all know it. We know there's something true. We know that people who killed other people for sports in a coliseum, that was evil. Now, I'm not saying the people themselves were purely evil. They lived in a society where everyone thought that was okay. So I can't necessarily judge the person. That's for God to judge a person. But I can say categorically, I'm comfortable to say that owning slaves because they were a different race or a different thing was an evil thing. And I'm comfortable to say that at all times. I have no issue with that. Now, what about the fact that there's different societies? It's only if there's absolute and real truths. And we believe every human being has access to that. Say the Svarim, that's Rosh Hashanah. That's what it means to make God your king, to take truth and make that the reigning principle in your life. God is the source of all reality and the source of all truth, and that comes first. And when that's real, when good and evil are real, when true and false is real, then there's room to say, let me now spend the 10 days of repentance and figure out what on earth is going on in my practical life, and how do I do this in a real way? Maybe I need to be more forgiving, more charitable, more friendly, more devout. Maybe I need to study more Torah and do more mitzvahs. Maybe, right? Maybe be more modest, be less whatever the thing is, figure it out. But you can't start talking about it. It's so easy. It's so easy to miss the big picture. I'm going to give you one last example of this, of how sometimes people can miss the big picture because we have 2 full minutes left. Listen to this example. I hope that this visual image is helpful. Someone's sitting at a wedding. It's their own wedding. They're about to walk down the aisle. And they were told that this is a very special time to pray. Walking down the aisle is a very special time. You pray. God is especially listening to you. It's called an Eit Ratzon. So they have a whole list of names, and they have a book that they're reading, and they shuffle down the aisle, and they recite all of these words of Tehillim. Yeah, you have another person who walks down the aisle and looks around, and he sees friends, he sees loved ones, he sees a lot of money put into the thing by his parents to pay for flowers that are going to be used for a few hours and then gone. And he looks around this room, and he feels grateful for the fact that he's getting married to somebody, and he's, and he's someone that he loves, and his siblings, and his thing. And out of that experience, he mutters a word or two to Hashem to say, thank you. Please bless us. Yeah, please heal my sick friend. The reason it's an Eis Ratzon is because you're present and because you're conscious. It's always easy to distract yourself with tasks and work, even religious kinds, and miss what's in front of you and what you're supposed to be experiencing. It's really easy. A person can come into Rosh Hashanah with a list of stuff they have to do for the next year and miss out on what this whole experience is supposed to be. A person sitting at a funeral is a tremendous opportunity, it says in the Talmud. It says it's a chance to reflect on your life and get great spiritual accomplishments. A person sitting at a funeral, I've seen this, where a person opens up a Tehillim and recites Tehillim. You know why? Because it's too hard for them to sit there for a minute and think someone just lost their brother and someone just lost their father. And this is really painful. And out of that experience to say Tehillim, it'll be well accepted. But if you're hiding from the experience, it's a big mistake. Torah and mitzvahs are not escapes. You don't do a whole bunch of extra mitzvahs and a whole bunch of extra Torah, right, as a way of escaping this Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a way to really reflect, is God, is truth the center of my life? Have I made God my king? Have I made reality the thing that defines me, and not me using myself to just convince myself that the way I'm living is just the best way? Am I able to do that? When I'm wrong about something, can I figure out that I'm wrong and change on a dime or not? And if not, that's Rosh Hashanah. And if we can focus on that, it's beyond language, it's before language, it's above language. So I'm absolutely convinced that what will come next is something very, very direct and very clear and obvious. We'll realize if this is really true, then here are the next steps for me to really grow. And I can see it happen. I can envision it as real. I can picture it in a way, as we were discussing in the beginning. So I want to bless every one of you, and even those who are not here, those I can see and those who I can't see, right? Because some of you guys didn't turn your screens on, but you're claiming that you're there, and I believe it, right? And I want to tell you that you should have a Shana Tova, Masuka, Ksiva V'Chasima Tova. Hey, Eric Friedman, I thought maybe you'd grown the dreadlocks back in the interim, and that's why. You should all have a wonderful, happy, fantastic New Year, filled with blessings and filled with everything you want. And you should have the clarity to be able to understand that call of the Shofar that harkens back, to the truths that we all know, without, even before the words that we use later to organize them and to sort out the universe. Wishing you all the best. Thank you so much for joining me this evening to learn Torah.